Hi, I'm Sonia in Cyber, and I had Roux-en-Y gastric bypass on 9/6/23. And a lot of questions that I get are usually centered around what is the difference between gastric bypass and gastric sleeve, or why did I decide to have gastric bypass over any of the other procedures like the DS and the SATI as well. I wanted to make this video to talk about that a little bit and really dive into the key differences between gastric bypass and gastric sleeve from my perspective, as far as why it was the fit for me and what I was going to be successful with, and I have been successful with. Now, I'm not going to dive in like the key differences in the actual procedures. I'll leave that to the medical professionals, and at the end of this video, I will point you to an amazing video by my surgeon that you can watch if you really want to dive into some of those key differences between the sleeve and the bypass. But in my video, I just want to talk about some of the indications that I had that showed me that bypass would be the better fit. Now, being completely transparent, when I first started to research bariatric surgery or weight loss surgery and take that as an option very seriously, which I didn't for pretty much my entire life up until this last year. But when I did, I thought I was gonna want the gastric sleeve. And I think some of that was because everywhere I looked, I would see sleeve here, sleeve here, sleeve here, sleeve here. I was consuming a lot of content online. I went on TikTok first and a couple of other places to just see other people's stories, to learn about possible complications, and to also see before and after results to see what I might expect if I were to go into any kind of bariatric surgery. See, in my mind, I only saw bariatric surgery as what you might have envisioned 20, 30 years ago when it first started, and you had a lot of these celebrities and folks that were at the forefront doing it, and they just did not look that great afterwards. They were too skinny in my eyes. You know, I like my curves. You know, I wanted a little bit of meat still on my bones, and I was really, really worried that I would end up looking like a bobblehead or a Tweety bird or who knows what. And I know that's horrible for me to say, but just being completely honest, that's where my head was at. So for the longest, I would completely shut it out. I had at least 2 or 3 surgeons that came to me within the last 2 years that would say, hey, have you thought about looking at weight loss surgery? I really think you'd be a great candidate for this. And they would come from different vantage points. Like one was a cardiologist, another one was my primary care physician. And they didn't even know that each other were having these conversations with me. And so it just kept coming up. And I tried injections first, Wegovy, which I'll talk about that in a different video sometime. I did it twice. The first time I was pretty successful, lost around 60 something pounds. But then as soon as I stopped the shots, which I'll get into that in another story as well, as far as why, the weight came back like in full force, and so did my hunger. And then the second time when I took it, I was being medicated for my thyroid issues, and it just was not working. It was counteracting with my other medications, and I ended up gaining weight. So I had to stop them at that point too. So at that point, I felt desperate. I needed something. And so that's where weight loss surgery came in. And so when I started to look into gastric sleeve and gastric bypass and any of the other procedures, I started to look at what made someone a good candidate and what kinds of things they would be looking for to make you someone that is qualified or a fit for any of these procedures. And what I quickly started to realize was that gastric bypass was a much better fit for me. The thing with gastric bypass, I mean, just hearing the word bypass scared me because, you know, bypass, you think triple heart bypass, you think of all these other things that are much more invasive and much more scary. However, as I started to dig into it more and I started to really learn and look on the medical side of it, I began to like realize little by little that it actually might be bypass that would be the better fit for me, which I then confirmed when I had the consult with my physician, because I went into that conversation with him having an idea of what I thought I would want, but I purposely held it back until I got his feedback based on what he thought after looking at my medical history and my unique case to tell me what he thought would possibly be the best procedure for me. And to my surprise and really pleasure, he ended up having the same idea that I did, which is that gastric bypass would be the best fit for me. So what is it about gastric bypass that made it better for me? Or what is it about it that was different from a sleeve? First of all, gastric bypass is reversible. It is not reversed often. I will tell you that right now up front. It only gets done in extreme cases if you're having some major complications and there's just a lot of other things going on where you might get a reversal or something like that. For me, that was important because I was a little worried because I was on the quote unquote lighter side for having these surgeries because my last clocked in heaviest weight was 286, though I think I was around 300 when I first started this process. And because of that, I was slightly worried that I would lose too much weight. I'm 5'9", and when I felt the healthiest and the most energetic and my best, I was around 200 pounds. So the idea that I might get below that scared me a little bit. And so I was worried about that. And the thing with the sleeve is they take the part that they split off from your stomach, because when you have any of these procedures, they're basically cutting into your stomach. They're splitting it up, making a smaller pouch. With the sleeve, that piece that is actually sectioned off is removed from your body. So there is no way to reverse that. There is a way to revise a sleeve. A lot of times people that end up having issues with the sleeve, whether early on or years later, end up revising to a bypass later. So for me, I didn't even want to have to worry about that. For me, I was like, well, if I ultimately might end up there anyway, then I might as well go for it, especially if I meet all the other requirements that make me a great candidate for bypass. The next thing for me was where my BMI sat and my comorbidities, meaning the different health issues that I had going on. I needed to lose a significant amount of weight. Sorry for the lighting change, but the sun went down and so had to make some adjustments, but we're gonna keep the show rolling. So next up was my BMI and the long-term success rate of procedures. So for me, my BMI was over 40, which because of that indicated that I would need likely something other than the sleeve. The sleeve a lot of times is utilized for people that have a BMI a little less than that, or for others that for whatever reason are unable to have a bypass, a DS, or a SADI. In my case, I did meet all the requirements for bypass, and I also had the additional comorbidities that they typically look for, whether you're paying with insurance or self-pay. For me, I was self-pay, so my surgeon had his own requirements on what I needed to meet to be able to be a qualified candidate in his eyes for this. And the comorbidities that I was dealing with were sleep apnea, asthma, high blood pressure, hypothyroidism, PCOS, and obviously obesity. Think what you want about the BMI scale. We all know there's some issues there. However, no matter how you looked at it, I was way overweight for my size, my height, and my frame. As I started to look into it further and talk to my doctor about it more as far as which procedures had a higher likeliness of long-term success, being able to sustain that weight loss and just being able to lose the amount of weight that I needed to lose, for me, it kept pointing back to bypass. For bypass, the average weight loss is around 100 pounds. I will tell you, do not let this deter you or discourage you if you determine that sleeve is the best procedure for you along with your surgeon, because I've seen countless people lose that same amount of weight, if not more, with sleeves. So you can have success with any of these tools. So please don't take this video as me saying that you need one over the other, that one is better than the other if you compare them side by side. What you may find is that one procedure will likely be better than the others for you when all of that extra context is considered. All right, the next thing that impacted my decision to move forward with bypass was acid reflux. That's another one of those health conditions that, see, I forgot to mention because I had so many of them. It's hard to keep track of them. I had some levels of GERD in the years past. It wasn't too severe. However, there is evidence, and you see it time and time again with people, that once they have the sleeve, the GERD symptoms and the acid reflux gets way worse. Or even for people that don't have it, they start to develop it. And so I did not want to take any risks in that department. I did not want to end up in a situation where I would have really bad acid reflux and then would have to go right back into surgery again. Complication rates, and also whatever my surgeon was most comfortable with and felt most confident in, knowing that I had had 2 other surgeries just the year before. And I will get into that story in a different video, but just long story short, I'm a kidney cancer survivor. I had a kidney tumor removed. During that surgery, I was injured, and then I ended up having to get an ileostomy placed, which was also taken down eventually. So I had a lot of stuff happen. And so obviously for me, I was worried because we really didn't know for sure how much scar tissue would be in there. I mean, I did my due diligence. I made sure my doctor had all the materials and all of my records. And he did say he felt like he had a very solid understanding of what was going on in my abdomen before he cut me open. But again, until he cut me open, he really didn't know for sure. Now, gastric bypass is the gold standard. This baby has been around like 50 years, multiple decades. It's been around forever. It has been fine-tuned. It has been perfected. It has been improved. Way back in the day, it was open surgery, which is also how it ended up getting a bad rap. On top of that, when the lap band came around, there were a lot of marketing dollars spent on just like basically crapping on the gastric bypass. Even if it was effective, just making it sound like it wasn't as great of a solution or an answer, or there were all these associated risks to get people away from gastric bypass and then to move forward with lap band. But as you can see, That's switched right back. Gastric bypass is back at the forefront. Lap band is now the bad procedure that like no one wants to do anymore and no one does do. And so yes, for me, I felt better going into it knowing that I was doing like the OG procedure because of the history that I had and the risks that I had that might be associated with that. I'm sure I'm forgetting some of the other points to bring up for gastric bypass versus gastric sleeve, but if I think of more after this video, I'll make sure to do a part 2. There'll be a lot more content coming to my page all about weight loss surgery, bariatric surgery. I do appreciate you being here, and I would love for you to hit that subscribe button and the bell so you can be notified when my new videos come out. And oh, the video from my surgeon, if you want to go watch it, it's Dr. John Pilcher from Sage Bariatric. You can search for him on YouTube. There's a video that he has that's gastric sleeve versus gastric bypass. And he talks about all kinds of aspects of those so that you can really start to understand the key differences and start to decide like which one you're thinking might be the answer for you when you move forward with this, so that you can go into that conversation with your surgeon a little more informed and educated and ready. What other videos and topics would you love for me to make some videos on? Let me know in the comments. All right, I'll see you on my next video.